I'm Melissa McKay. I'm stepping in last minute for Trudy. She got a last minute invitation. She and Jack got a minute invitation to Hawaii. So she is there right now. And she taught, I know, mudita a couple of weeks ago. We can all have mudita for envisioning Jack and Trudy happy and enjoying themselves on a beach in Hawaii. I know that makes me very happy. She wanted me to send a message that it was very last minute. She will be here next week. And that she would like for all of us to incline our minds towards an awareness of the suffering that is going on in Burma, of course, where I've been and I've practiced. There was a coup by the military junta. Aung San Suu Kyi, the democratically elected leader, is now in jail, and civilians are dying. So she wants us to dedicate. I would love that as a dedication to Burma and also to India, that is being ravaged with coronavirus right now. So that was her message for you. And again, she'll be back next week. I know I've seen most of you before that have your cameras on. It's nice to see you all again. If anybody is new here, then what we do is start with meditation. And then I'll give a little Dharma talk, time for Q&A, and then Kathy leads in breakout groups at about 12:30 for anybody that wants to stay. Of course, all of it is optional. Okay, so I know that we generally practice mindfulness meditation in this group. I'm going to give as a suggestion too, optional for you, and I'll do minimal guidance because I know there's a lot of experienced people in this group, to practice concentration, a concentration technique too, either mindfulness or concentration. So within the Buddhist system, there are two forms of practices, two distinctions between the types of practice. And that is mindfulness, which is the primary technique used in Vipassana meditation, a meditation that is used to study our consciousness and our minds, to observe our experience as it's happening, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, how they arise, what happens as we're experiencing them, and the experiences of our bodies and our senses, and what happens at the sense doors. So there's that, which leads to wisdom for us. We understand how the mind works, how consciousness works, how things come into being, how they have three characteristics of dukkha, anicca, and anatta: impermanent, not self, and stressful. Concentration techniques are every other kind of meditation that there is, in that you put your mind on a single object. And that object can be a visualization. It can be the breath, which is a common one used. It can be a word or a mantra. It can be a loving kindness. In the Buddhist system and Theravada Buddhist system, 40 different meditation objects were taught. And sometimes people have a question of what is the difference? And I remember that feeling that in the beginning of my practice too. What is the difference between concentration and mindfulness? But we can see that when we're concentrated on an object, like a visualization or a word, a mantra, then the mind is absorbed in that. It's not paying attention to what we're experiencing. And the purpose of that is to bring the mind to a feeling of calm and tranquility, to block out the busyness and the noise that occupies our attention so much of the time, to bring clarity with which in a Buddhist system we can use to then explore consciousness with mindfulness. So the most common concentration object is Anapanasati, which is the awareness of the breath as it comes in and out of your nostrils. So I'm going to give instructions for that before we sit, and then I won't do much guidance because maybe some of you guys are taking a different concentration object, or maybe you're practicing mindfulness, and feel free to do so. But those of you that would like to try to practice single pointed awareness, it brings calm more quickly than a mindfulness practice does. Then you bring your attention to the rim of the nostrils, wherever you feel the touch of the breath that's coming in and out. And with the concentration technique, it's okay to have the mind more absorbed in the concept of the breath. So you can note in the mind in with the inhale and out with the exhale. And that noting might absorb more of the attention than the experience of the breath does. And that's okay. Our minds aren't subtle right when we sit down to practice meditation. And they become more subtle with the techniques of the practice of meditation, with concentration. So in the beginning, to take a grosser object, a more apparent object, is something that's useful. So attention to the nostril, but your mind might be absorbed more in the concept in and out. And as you're doing that, it can also be helpful if your mind is busy, busy, busy. Maybe you've been busy in your life. If you're busy in your life, you're going to sit down, you're going to see a busy mind, right? To count the breath. So counting technique, in, out, 1, in, out, 2, in, out, 3, up to 5, up to 8, not more than 10, any number, it doesn't matter. Okay, so like I said, I won't do much guidance since we might be employing different techniques, but let's set up a posture for meditation. We'll sit for a half hour for those of you that are new. And if you're just joining us, again, I'm Melissa. Trudy is in Hawaii. Very last minute, she and Jack got an invitation. She sends her love and her good wishes and says she'll be back next week. So finding a meditation posture and bring your attention into your body and allow yourself to release and relax any unconscious gripping or holding in your body. It could be around your head, your eyes, your heart. See that you're in a posture that you'll be able to maintain comfortably. And release any feeling of rushing or leaning into the future. And rather than leaning into the meditation object, have a sense of the object coming to your awareness. And giving yourself full permission to let go of your duties of the world for now. Heart, mind settle. Into your meditation practice. Guiding the mind back gently that frequently wanders. And take more heart in the moments that your attention is present. Those moments might not be consecutive, but each moment brings stillness in the heart mind. and establishing a patient, loving relationship with your mind. And releasing tension if you feel it begin to well back up in your body. Always the question what we're doing with our attention and being intentional and directing attention. Always doing that just one moment at a time, one breath at a time. Okay, again, welcome everybody. If you joined while we were sitting, I'm Melissa, stepping in very last minute for Trudy. She's in Hawaii. She and Jack got a last minute invitation there. She sends her love, and we'll be back for sure next week. So I would like to talk about a Buddhist concept that is actually not that easy to talk about or to give inspiration or to make people feel inspired by. Well, anyways, I shouldn't say that because maybe some of you will be. I certainly wasn't inspired by this as a concept. The Pali word is Nekama, and Nekama means, is translated as renunciation. There's a certain sutta that says that the heart leaps at the thought of renunciation. And does anybody here have that feeling of your heart leaping at the thought of renunciation? Okay, may or may not. My heart didn't leap at the thought of renunciation in the beginning of my practice. And I think a lot of the reason why is because I had a certain kind of conditioning growing up Catholic around reasons for renunciation, which was almost solely for self-flagellation or deprivation in some way. But within Buddhist practice, the practice of renunciation is done for a different purpose. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and talk about the fact that you already have this and it's something that you already do regularly. And it's just good to draw the lines between the benefit of your doing that practice and the benefits that you see in your life. So when we go to work, rather than doing something that's comfortable, staying in bed, whatever, then we're practicing that quality. When we exercise, if we exercise, then we're practicing that quality, because we're going into that activity not doing something specifically to be comfortable or for the immediate pleasure that it brings. And so the Buddha emphasized this in his monks, of course, who live with that quality pretty much throughout their lives. So monks do not purposefully do things to seek pleasure. Their whole lives are set up so that they don't do that. They are given food and eat whatever is offered to them. They don't seek entertainment like we do. They don't wear fine clothing or go on vacations. Their life is for the non-seeking of pleasure, specifically, but not to put them in confinement, but because it's found, we would find in ourselves too, that seeking of pleasure, which is called tanha, is something that creates a sort of neurotic relationship with life, which is filled with pleasure and pain. Today, each of us here will experience pleasure and will experience pain. And this inner relationship to it is what the whole practice of Buddhism is addressing, so that the mind, heart becomes more open to the totality of the experiences of our life. And when that happens, the pleasure that is experienced is different than that of the senses, a more refined pleasure. So there's more categorized pleasure in the Buddhist system. And something that the Buddha said was, whatever happiness is found in sensual desire or sensual pleasure, and whatever heavenly bliss, these are not worth 1/16th part of the happiness that comes with cravings. And so, and that wasn't meant by the Buddha as his particular judgment to pleasure as worth, how it's worth, but how you and how we experience that for ourselves. So as the mind goes in, like what we practice today with concentration, there's a lot of renunciation being practice with that, Nekama, which, by the way, the other translation of Nekama is the pleasure of renunciation. And I think that's a better place for us to incline our mind towards, that there is a greater pleasure that comes from not giving in to this tanha, which we're going to talk about and investigate, see it in our own psyches a little bit more. And my whole agenda, if I were to have one here, is to get your heart to leap at renunciation. Because it really is something that's quite exquisite. And again, it's something that we do all of the time. And then doing it within our meditation practice is also helpful for us to see that pain in our practice isn't a sign of failure. Pleasure isn't a reward. It's just what happens within the practice. And that ability strengthens the mind, strengthens our character, and strengthens our ability to stay with inevitable adversity, difficulties, and obstacles that we're all going to face in our life. And the study of this particular aspect of the mind, which blinds us at various times and regularly throughout our day, giving it a name and starting to play with that edge of when we're seduced by pleasure, and when can we practice nekama, something that would let it go to start to experience these higher kinds of happiness. So any athlete does this already. They have to let go of a lot of things, to become a great athlete. Can't give in to the fickleness of the mind. All of our minds are very fickle. They want this or they want that. And so they need some clear guidance and some clear direction, which is the stability that our meditation practice can bring. So in the concentration practice, we're letting go of everything else that the mind would present. And that is a form of renunciation of this nekama. And a single pointed attention then can bring the mind into places of rapture and joy that are beyond the experiences of what we experience just from pleasures from our regular life. So it says in the suttas, there is the case where a monk quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from unskillful qualities, and enters and remains in the first jhana. These are meditative states that happen from concentration practices. Rapture and pleasure born from this withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. With the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluation, one enters and remains in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of composure, unification of awareness, free from directed thought and evaluation. So as one begins to experience blissful feelings from their meditation practice, or just benefit, or just calm, or just clear thinking, or tranquility, and seeing that part of getting there took this act of renunciation, this is what will make the heart more leap at the idea of renunciation. Has anybody been watching the movies that are nominated now? The Academy Awards, I believe, are tonight. All of the best picture films, I've been watching them, and there's kind of a basic theme of a lot of them. I found them, many of them, very beautiful, but which is suffering. A lot of them pointing to suffering in the world. And after a year of many of us facing various forms of suffering, we can get a little bit tired of the mind can get overwhelmed with just looking at suffering. This isn't a criticism of those films. I find them beautiful, like I said. Our meditation practice is helping us to learn towards, to look towards suffering in our life, but not just for suffering. And renunciation, not just for renunciation, but for the transformation of the suffering into beauty and into happiness. And so renunciation, not just for renunciation, not just to put ourselves in chains, as it were, but come to higher states of understanding and of happiness. And that's something that is within possibility for us. So where I like to look at this, and where there's a lot of structure placed for monks, even who keep 227 precepts. In the Theravada tradition, the monks have 227 precepts. A huge amount of them are around food. And because that's an activity that we do every day, it serves as a good sort of way of exploring this renunciation or sense pleasure seeking. So sense pleasures is something that's talked about a lot in Buddhism. And it means very precisely what it is. Sometimes that word makes people think of sexuality, but of course it doesn't mean just sexuality, but pleasure that happens at any of our sense doors: sight, taste, touch, and the sixth sense in Buddhist practice is the mind objects, pleasurable things happening in our minds. So we have a relationship in life with pleasure that comes and goes at the sense doors. And that relationship is this tanha. So it isn't the pleasure itself that is the problem. And in fact, some people have a tendency to close themselves off from pleasure in life, maybe from their conditioning. In some ways, some people are very open to pleasure, and some people have a tendency to reject it. And both of those, well, that's also another unskillful relationship. But what we want to do is to see the tanha in the mind that makes us chase after certain kinds of experiences, which actually then, as it turns out, we investigate, we see, creates a lot of stress. So a mind that doesn't do that is much more open to and notices the flowers, the pleasure that's already here. The mind that doesn't get honed in on and small around a singular kind of pleasure can notice the beauty and the pleasure that is already here. So we don't want to think of this as an oppressive way, as wrong or bad. My teacher one time said, when we're mindful of those experiences of pleasantness in our life, they actually become more pleasant. But around food, because it's an activity that we do many times in our day, after moving from New York City, I'm not walking as much. And so I've put on weight, and I've had to be a lot more mindful, or I did put on weight and I lost it again, but I had to be more mindful of what I'm eating. And this is an area where the mind can really want to just go for that craving that comes. Craving, it's just wanting something pleasant, right? The body's not really hungry, but there's craving. And in the renunciation of that feeling of craving, I've found a higher kind of happiness of feeling lighter, not feeling uncomfortable in my body from overeating, having more mental clarity, my body functioning better, better health, all of those kinds of things. So that is just as a metaphor for what happens when we don't give into that mind that just craves things. And of course, the mind that craves is also, and again, it's something you do already. You all of you go to work, you have a roof over your head, then you're doing this already. But it's good to start to see and highlight that it's something that we can do within our meditation practice too. Oftentimes when people meet with difficulty or obstacles, which everybody will in the meditation practice, then they feel like they've done something wrong. But as the mind starts to get stronger at this ability, composing itself, staying disciplined, staying centered, then there's beautiful rewards that come, and the potential and power of our mind to experience these jhanic states of bliss or things. Or even the last time I was here, which was just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the psychic powers those that are developed, written about very regularly in the Buddhist teachings. And another thing and power that the mind can have in its potential and benefit is that of healing the body. This is a really beautiful book that I've read recently. Can you see it? I can't see me. Yeah, Meditation Saved My Life. And this monk endured torture in China and fled Tibet. He's a Tibetan monk. And he came to the United States in, I think, 2000 or, around 2000, and lived in New York, in actually the same neighborhood that I lived in New York, in Brooklyn. And through his escape from China, he had gangrene in his leg and ankle, and he went to, I think, Bellevue Hospital in New York City, and they wanted to amputate. And there was something in his intuition that he didn't want to have his leg amputated, and so he called out to the Dalai Lama, who said, "Why are you seeking healing outside of yourself?" And so he went into a 3-year retreat in a small apartment in Brooklyn, New York, and practiced meditation 12 hours a day for 3 years. And it's a beautiful story about that and how he was able to heal his body and overcome gangrene, which is the death of his leg. In Burma, where I practice, it's very well known that people could have these kinds of amazing healings that happen when they practice renunciation, honed the power of their mind, and yeah, great healing. I had a friend that went into a retreat in a wheelchair, and she came out walking after a 2-month Vipassana retreat. But he had a lot of skepticism by the doctors. They didn't want to help him or serve. But after 3 years, the gangrene in his leg went away, and he was able to actually walk on it. So quite miraculous. But this is something he says in relationship to this pleasure and pain that's part of our life. He said, "At the age of 37, I have not been spared the hardships of life. These hardships have been my guru. They have taught me that suffering is natural, that it is part of the wheel of lives. We have been suffering since a time without beginning. Recognizing this suffering is the first noble truth Sakyamuni Buddha founded on his teachings 2,500 years ago in India. It is not by avoiding suffering that we put an end to it. By understanding it and accepting it, we stop opposing it, and we have a chance of eliminating it for ourselves and for all beings. Accepted suffering is no longer painful. It becomes strength, a power that transforms. For 3 years, the fire of suffering burned very old karmas within me. In my purified heart, I welcomed the pains of human suffering, and I gave humanity an offering, all the light, all the bliss that was being born within me through practice." So within the practice of Buddhism, that practice of renunciation is to move us towards this kind of greater bliss. There's a passage from the suttas that says just as the taste of the ocean has one taste, which is salty, the taste of the Dhamma, the practice, has one taste, which is freedom. We find a freedom of a heart that isn't narrow anymore, that isn't stressful, looking for particular experiences, but really can open to and face the difficulties and the sufferings of our life. So do we understand there's this tanha is a particular kind of desire, which is the one that's named in the Four Noble Truths as the cause of our suffering. Tanha says, I need that particular experience. And when that's there, it really blinds us. I gave this talk in another group that I just taught right before this one. And somebody in it shared with her experience, who had experience with overeating, that she would reflect on uh, this pleasure that she would get from the senses are very impermanent. They're fleeting. So we don't have to renounce them, but to come to see them just as they are, these fleeting experiences of comfort. Don't uplift the mind. These fleeting experiences of pleasure, don't uplift the mind. I find for us, we really need balance. We're not monks. Uh, we have to work, we have jobs, we have families to take care of, we carry more tension in our bodies for that. And so we balance our lives with a certain amount of pleasure seeking. Uh, and so finding whatever balance in that is helpful for you, but doing so by starting to get aware of this part of our psyches that's so regularly with us, this feeling of tanha, of craving, that wants something comfortable now, and exploring how quickly does that satisfy. Because the more we feed that, then the more it becomes alive within us. And of course, that can lead to addictions, it can lead to all kinds of stress. So the opposite of that is this practice of nekama, the pleasure of renunciation. And I have really been able to find that place in my practice where when that desire comes up in me, I feel the pleasure of not giving into it because of the benefits that I know that are going to come from staying. So not for self-deprivation, not to be hard on ourselves, but for deep care of ourselves, for love of ourselves, for finding something deeper, stronger, and that opens our heart up to life. Okay, so I'll stop talking and we can move to questions at this time, or shares if you'd like to. Thank you for your attention.
So go ahead and raise your little hand. It's either in reactions, or if you have an older version of Zoom, it might be in your participant section. Or if you want to put your question in the chat, either to the group or privately to me, you can do that as well. Question or comment or experience.
Thanks for sharing all the links on the side. Yeah, good. That book it's a really beautiful book. I highly recommend it.
Oh, sorry, Melissa. Rick, I see your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Is it?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yeah, hi Rick. How are
Hi,
you?
Melissa. Always good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Does the practice consider renunciation of not just pleasure, but negative things to be sort of a weak form of renunciation? If we renounce cynicism or a certain level of blindness, is that frowned upon?
No, absolutely not. No, I would say that's the majority of practice too, because we're not renouncing pleasure when we are practicing renunciation, but the afflictive feeling of tanha. And so the same with any other afflictive feeling. Renounce in English though has this very like you renounce somebody, it's like forever. It's nekama is really a kind of different understanding. It's something that we can do for a period of time. And certainly in a moment of mindfulness, we practice that. It doesn't have to be forever and ever and ever. It's not a forever thing. And so and so that's why the understanding of it as something that we already do and something that we do for a period of time, but also to bring benefit. So there should be a sense of hope and upliftment within that, you know. And so, yeah, when we're not giving into a mind that's judging, for example, you know, we're refining yoniso manasikara, wise attention, where we're placing our attention. Anytime we purposefully place our attention in that is that moment of renunciation of afflictions. And that is what you're calling the negativity of the mind. And yeah, that's exactly what practice is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bernard, do you want to unmute yourself? Is your hand up?
Okay. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just very much appreciate this talk because I practice concentration and I need guidance at it at times. And so this just kind of helps me frame what I'm doing. And I resonate very much with the notion that, and I've often thought that a truly sensual life does not include a lot of excess and does take a lot of self-restraint and discipline, because I notice I enjoy my life most when I work out even if I don't feel like it. And having one more drink is not fun, because I kind of have started to reinterpret when someone offers me a drink. I think, well, what you're really offering me is a headache in the morning. You know, and it doesn't take much. I mean, I just don't process it well. So yeah, it's really better to renounce certain things. My heart still doesn't leap, but I realize that if I, yeah, just clean living is really the best way to enjoy life.
Well, you will find your heart will lead. I mean, it's like we have to draw the lines. When we intensively study our minds with like on meditation periods, you start to see the lines, the connections of the dots of when I do this, when this, that, when not this, not that, the connections of there are causes that we're putting in, and that will lead to a certain effect. And so we, like I said, we have this, we do it already. As
Yeah.
so really seeing that, but then also connecting that you do that can help you to strengthen that quality and to see its beauty. And the heart will leap. The heart can leap at just how you can, the possibility to start living above the afflictive mind, having a bright mind, having a clear mind, having a heart that doesn't feel confined or constricted or feel so heavy, having a more flexible mind, all coming from this like restraint. And for me with food too, I would say when I do eat, it's so much more pleasurable than the periods of time if I do overeat, for example. And we all know what it's like to be overindulgent. I was 5 years old when I learned that. Mother's cookies. I ate a whole bag of them and I threw up. And to this day, I can't look at mother's cookies. That overindulgence of that. Yeah, we could see that, but that's Tana. She'll trick us that way, it will trick us in the way when it comes into their mind. You need this, you need this. And when we're first practicing sitting with that feeling, so many diet programs or addiction programs teach to avoid the feeling, to not have it arise of craving. But the strength really comes when you start to see you don't need to avoid that feeling, but confront it. You can look right at it. What is it? What are you saying to me, you little liar? Say I need this, and then the first few moments, if we've been accustomed to giving into it, anybody that's dealt with quitting smoking or quitting anything, it's strong. But the more we sit with it, the weaker it gets. And then that isn't what is it when we're experiencing craving? It hurts, it's stressful. And people do all kinds of things just to avoid that feeling. They just don't want this feeling. Well, we have a different power, and it's a very powerful power that says, okay, I'll just feel it. And what happens? It's impermanent. It doesn't stay forever. You want something? What I see when I'm sitting with food, oh, I want this. Sit with it. You don't want it anymore. and you didn't have to give into it for it to go away. And then you have the freedom, the happiness of the freedom of that craving in that moment. All of the Four Noble Truths are contained within that understanding. All of them are right there. Here's suffering when there's craving. Here's not suffering when there's not craving. Sounds dull, it can, until we start to investigate, well, what is this craving, particularly for things to be pleasant at the stores? They're not going to be always. So we can address this neurosis that we have with our relationship to life. And that's liberation, that's freedom. And that's our potential. So we're waking it up. So come on, leap heart, leap at renunciation, leap. So thank you for your.
Thank you. Thank you. Just what you said is just great. It's a good teaching. Great teaching. Thanks.
Thanks, Bernard. I see a question in the chat, which Melissa, you kind of just spoke to, ironically. But if you want to, if there's anything else you want to say on it, the question was the difference between renunciation and repression.
Did I? I don't think I did speak to that. That's a good question, and one should find that distinction in their heart, because repression is not it's based in aversion. It's another unwholesome mind state, and we could use this practice of renunciation and think that it means that, and that happens in our practice. We confuse concepts until clarity comes. But oppressing, the oppression of Tana, for example, is not a useful thing. It will just get stronger. Any emotion that we try to oppress will just get stronger inside of us. And so in renunciation, we let those things come to the surface and then choose something differently. It's much more gentle. There's no tension in that action. There's tension in the action of trying to oppress. And it's something that we will do with our mindfulness practice. We're all habituated to oppress certain thoughts or feelings or emotions. And with practice of non-repression, I like to call mindfulness the non-expression and non-oppression or repression of things that happen in our mind. We can't oppress thoughts. We want to see them when they arise. So it's a fine line, but it's a very important one, because one is unwholesome, repression is unwholesome, and renunciation is wholesome. And that can be felt in your own body. And as we get more sensitive to, with concentration, with mindfulness practice, the experiences of our body, when something has veered into the unwholesome territory, you'll feel it as tension in your body. And you'll start to recognize it more. So incline the mind towards non-repression. Does the person that asked that question have a follow-up?
Eva, did you want to ask anything else with that, or is that? She's not raising her hand, so I'm going to assume no.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Robert, I see you raising your actual hand in your little box. You go ahead and
Yeah.
ask your
Okay.
question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just kind of starting out, and my question is, okay, we have these two practices. How does one combine them on a daily basis, or do you? Or is it alternate every other day? Concentration and then vipassana, or?
Yeah, you could alternate as a daily practice. Both are good to do. I mean, the one thing that is happening there's a certain muscle that we're building in any meditation practice, which is this muscle of directing our attention, conscious direction of our attention. And that is a very powerful muscle that we want to build. If you're going on a longer intensive retreat period, you want to focus on one thing to get the full benefit of that practice. They lead to different places. But within your daily life, alternating is fine. Spending a period of months and months on one technique daily is fine. With concentration, you might start, if you want to do a mindfulness practice, it's always helpful to start for about 10 minutes, depending on the length of time that you're practicing with concentration. because that helps to still the mind more, and then you can drop it and move into concentration. So, but 2 techniques is enough if you're a beginner. Are you a beginner, Robert?
I better say I'm an eternal beginner because I've cycled through various forms of meditation and I never had the feeling of being able to do it, but that I've been told is par for the course.
That is par for the course. Yeah. The not doing it means that we are thinking that the mind will stay more consecutively than it does. And minds just don't do that. And so knowing that there's a lot of gaps in our awareness, it's a great builder of compassion, these gaps of awareness that we can see are in our own mind. We're not always in control of our minds. You know, we don't always know what's happening. We have these appearances all the time. And when you've meditated, Robert, have you felt a benefit afterwards?
Yes. Okay, there's somebody made this quip at maybe it was Joko Beck. You think meditation is hard, try not meditating.
Yeah,
Because then you see all the crap that you can at least get some control over.
that's right. So you have experienced that, the benefit of, okay, well, then you're meditating, right? That's it. You're putting in those causes, then you're doing it right. That's it. I mean, and most people do, you know, it doesn't take meditating too many times to see what the benefit is. And so just keep your mind on that, on those benefits, and know that the more one does, the more benefits grow like that. Yeah.
Well, I had a reaction to all of this. I fell off the wagon and everything. I'm just getting back. I mean, I stopped any kind of meditation for about a year. And I don't know, it seemed like it was too much effort to do anything. Now I'm trying to get back on the wagon.
Yeah, good. Well, welcome back. And that's a path that many people take. We get on, I mean, this practice really helps us to do that and to understand that. I say we have like a Kung Fu Panda um, awareness in our culture. Sometimes we think we should be masters at something without all of the training behind it that it takes. But it takes a coming back and a training and a practicing again and falling off and coming back again and falling off and coming back again. So I'm glad you're back, Robert. Good to have you.
Thanks, Robert. Meredith, I see your hand up, and I just want to say we have a lot of questions today, so I apologize if we don't get to everyone, but Meredith, you've had your hand up for a little bit if you want to unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, I guess let's see. One of my questions is, gosh, why am I going blank already? I am someone who tends to overeat and am judgmental about it with myself. So one thing that I've thought of, well, I've listened this morning, is like holding, I don't know, this sounds like not something you recommend, but I thought I'd say it. You know, holding Tana in friendliness, like I wanted, I'm gonna have it, you know. I think that's okay. I mean, I can hear that I'm lifting up my judgments from it, but also, I don't know, it reminds me, I've worked a lot with kids, and when they're like, have to. For me, with them and me, it works better to hold them, and you know, there is a need there, and it isn't necessarily, at least this is how I see it, that whatever it is that I want immediately crave. But I mean, I noticed you're saying, you little liar, And I wonder about that, you know, it's like, and even maybe the word confront, you know, I feel like, ooh, no, I'm really doing it wrong. But
Yeah, I think I know where you're
listen,
going with this.
just
So
to listen carefully, you know, and kindly to this, oh, yes, I want it. Yes, I can. Yes, I will.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and calm, you know, and comfort and listen what's in there.
Yeah. Yes. And the sort of tone that we take with our practice requires, well, the skillfulness comes. There's different qualities of the approach to our practice. And gentleness and friendliness is always something. Yes. Meeting Tana and craving with friendliness is always something that I would encourage to see it. That's the non-repression of it. And sometimes really seeing it as in the ways for me in that moment, the ways my mind has felt tricked into doing something that was not for my benefit, but actually led to great harm for me.
That
And
I understand.
yeah, so that's where the little liar part of it came from. But
Yeah.
always friendliness, always the mind. It wasn't maybe not the emphasis of this particular talk, but always an awareness that is with friendliness will serve and move one's practice forward. It's a wholesome mind state. It's an uplifting mind state, and it certainly was my intention for what we're talking about today.
Do you think there's something to listen to or just to comfort it? I mean, to me, it just feels like
That's what mindfulness is. It's listening. It's an examination. And always don't, as the Buddha said, not to let go of something before you see it for yourself, that it's not useful or helpful. That's what mindfulness is doing, is a deep listening. What in here is really helping me? I'm going to keep that.
That's it.
Keep growing that. And what is not?
Yeah.
And it turns out every mind has things that are not helpful to it. They're not ours. The self-judgment comes when we identify with these things. They're just visitors in the mind. They're weather pattern. So we grow in discernment, and mindfulness
Right.
helps us to do that. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Meredith. A question in the chat from Piper. Do you think there is something to the notion that some renunciation has a finite amount of time during which it is expected? Intermittent fasting, giving up certain things with the context of organized religion, Lent, etc.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like that question. And I think so too. And certainly there's more renunciation that's done when we're practicing meditation. It's all renunciation. If you sit and you don't do anything else, then that is there the whole time. And you only do that for a certain period of time, right? And fasting also is something that you do during a certain period of time. But what that does, that period of time does, is diminish something that can become an unconscious habit. That's what meditation does. It helps us to sit with our feelings and not be in just a reactive place. So those things get more stilled with us. And that's what fasting does too. I think within Buddhism, it's all within a certain amount of time, unless you're a monk. Then monks, again, like I said, their whole lifestyles are really set up, or nuns are really set up so that they can practice that all the time. But for us, it will be within a finite period of time that we're practicing it. Good question. Thank you.
Great. Clark, I see you've had your hand up for a little bit. If you want to unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Wonderful discussion. I'm wondering about if there's teachings on anger in relationship to renunciation and seduction. Personally, I've been involved in an anger group for a number of years, and we talk about the anger experience again and again. And one thought that came to my mind using the phrase of skillful renunciation of seduction as it applies to anger is, for those of us that have a fair amount of anger, there's a really seductive quality to anger. I think it comes on in part for me, certainly because there's a feeling of not enough control in a situation or not enough power in a situation. And what the anger does for me at moments is it says, I'm going to do whatever it takes to gain control here. I'm going to do whatever it takes to gain power in the situation, and I'm going to get angry. And so there is a seductive quality to that of like, I feel so satisfied that I was frustrated and aggravated, and now I get to be angry.
Mhm.
And the renunciation of that, which we've never called it that in the anger group, but it applies very much. We talk about when you feel that desire to be angry, you feel your blood pressure rising, you feel the rise. Can you bring awareness to it, realize it in the moment, and step back, take a time out, just move away, see if you can reconnect and reground, step away. And it's a skillful application. So it really does seem to me a skillful renunciation of that seduction and anger, but I was wondering if anger is talked about in any of the teachings.
Yeah, more it's talked about with the relationship to craving as a sort of antidote, but certainly, and there's different antidotes with anger. Do you know the antidote given for anger?
Do I know the antidote?
Yeah.
If I knew the antidote, I would be a lot calmer in life.
Loving kindness is the antidote given by the Buddha for anger. So in Yoniso Manasikara, wise attention, anger arises from unwise attention to thoughts of anger, and not enough attention to thoughts of loving kindness. So as we see, anger is a destructive mind state. The mind gets really narrow and clamped down. Violence, of course, can come out of there. All of the afflictions, what are called kilesas, come with, I can't remember how you just said it, but some sense of that you need to do something.
Yeah, power or being heard, having control.
Yeah, and so then we just explore, and sometimes we have to really act on these destructive tendencies to see, well, did that lead to something of benefit or did it not? We reflect on it. Is this useful? Is this helpful? And that's what we're doing with our practice. But yes, that quality is there as soon as you're not doing something that the mind is telling you to do. There was one time I was on a retreat and I felt this feeling of anxiety and I couldn't locate it. I didn't know what my mind was doing. And I realized at some point, I finally located it, that I was feeling anxious because I was relying on wanting to meditate, to meditate. I was relying on sometimes I wanted to on this intensive retreat, and sometimes I didn't want to. And I kept wanting to want to. And so it was creating all of this stress. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. I don't have to want to. I'm going to anyways. And there is a place of real power in my mind. My mind's telling me to do something and I'm not going to do it. And that's a power that we gain in each moment that we're mindful. We're gaining in the power of listening to, and really with humility, realizing you're born a human. We're all born human. This is all human stuff. We're born with these afflictive mind states that mislead us. And so, growing in awareness of all of that and enlightening, illuminating our consciousness brings this great power. It's power. It's power.
Well, you had described it as not enough focus on loving kindness and too much focus on anger or aggression. But I find literally dealing with the experience of anger, I'm well aware when I'm in the middle of it, it's like, A, you need to calm down. B, you need to find loving kindness. And the manifestation of anger is saying to me, screw it, forget about loving kindness. You're angry. And that's, to me, the seductive quality. And I will say, as you were describing before, the moments that I'm now able to step back and step away and let the anger calm and cool, the pleasure of having done that and go, oh my God, I didn't rage out for 5 minutes. I just stepped away, calmed down, the whole thing. It's very pleasurable in that sense.
You just described why the Buddha taught what he did, because that's where, when this, when that, when not this, not this, and when not this, not. And these are causes that we put in, the conditions that we put in, and the whole teaching on morality within the Buddhist system is for that feeling of non-remorse, that which brings great confidence in one, like I didn't harm beings in this life. And we don't realize that we spoke divisively about people in our circles or something, and that's actually why we feel anxious later on. We don't draw those kinds of connections, but there's a cause and effect relationship to it. So everything is based in that, and everything is, like we talked about last time, that AE Pasiko, one has to see it. Come and see it means one has to see that for themselves. So whatever the Buddha teaches, whatever I pass along that he teaches, one should never pick it up, but really investigate and see what leads to benefit, what doesn't lead to benefit.
Thanks.
Thanks, Clark. So someone asked in the chat, asked me privately if this is recorded. It is recorded, and I'll try and put the link, but you can go to the Insight website and you'll see, if you look at the categories, that you can find any of the old classes recorded up there. It might take a day or two. I'll try and find the link though. And then Melissa, we're coming to a close, but we have one kind of long question comment in the chat. Did you want to do that, or did you want to close up?
I'll do, if we got 2 minutes, I'll do the long one.
Okay, I know it's kind of a mouthful, so let's see what we can do in this last few minutes. Charles writes, how much can be learned from someone retreating into a small apartment to meditate 12 hours a day? Who can afford financially to do that? Isn't that an avoidance of daily life? Isn't it more helpful to be able to live a normal life while dealing with the unavoidable challenges of life? If we lead a life of renunciation, is that fair to our family and friends who need our participation and even provision of life's pleasures? Excesses of any kind are to be renounced, but to renounce everything pleasurable is unrealistic. If we find no pleasure, what is life all about? Isn't it better to live our imperfect lives rather than to spend an inordinate amount of time just trying to prolong it? Doesn't craving equate with incentive to accomplish anything productive, such as goals we desire in life, educational, professional?
Right here, because there's enough in that question for me to keep it brief. Okay, so there's a piece of that said renouncing pleasure. So again, renunciation is not a renouncement of pleasure, but so remember that, because that's a really important piece. And I think I said it, but not renouncing pleasure and pay, that would be an aversion to life, and the Buddha didn't teach that. We investigate this particular quality of tanha in our psyches. So watch it when you meditate, and as it will arise, you're sitting there and you want something else, but you're intending to meditate, but your mind starts fantasizing about tea, or I don't know, whatever it will fantasize about. That's the moment where we can practice with this, not taking it as a whole theory for how you're going to change your life, but right at this moment of practicing with this very particular feeling, and watch its frequency of coming and going. Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Is it useful? Is it not useful? The other piece of this question is a very often asked question that comes with a kind of misunderstanding about the Buddhist practice, and it's probably the most frequently asked question. There's a few of them that are repeatedly asked, and this is one of them. The Buddha it's kind of like an athlete that goes in for training. They may train for 8 hours a day or something, but they're training for a specific competition to strengthen these muscles. And with the strength of those muscles, whatever the muscles, they can give a good performance in whatever competition. And it's the same with intensive periods of practice of meditation. Because when you practice in intensive periods, you strengthen certain qualities. And the Buddha did that for periods of time. This monk did it. In Tibetan traditions, they do it for 3 years of time. Every year, the monks would go in at the rains retreat for 3 months at a time, so that they get their own psyches right, their own hearts good, clear, filled with loving kindness. That's easier done when you don't have to, but it certainly isn't avoiding life. It's going right into. In life, we try to avoid. In life, we're running away from a lot of our experiences. And meditation practices help to really turn towards those experiences, to open the heart towards those experiences, to investigate and see what we can do to live a happier life. It's not avoiding life, it's how to live a happier life. And that's what the whole practice is. And that takes removing yourself from busy, have to do. It's just what's required. So, okay. Thank you, everybody. Nice to sit with you all. I think you guys, some of you can stay. And those of you that are, oh my God, so many messages. I'm going to stay and just read all the messages. But those of you that are leaving can sign off. Have a good day. You can unmute yourself and say goodbye or whatever you'd like to say. And take care. Be well. Be happy.
Thank you so much.
You too.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Melissa. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Melissa.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Learning
Bye.
to weep.
Thank you.
Oops, there he is, sleeping.